You're listening to the Board Game Snobs podcast. You have chosen wisely.
So today we interview Sean Epperson from Think 12 Games. Let's just cut right into the interview.
So yeah, let's. What do you want to start off with? I was kind of interested in your previous games that you've published.
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about whatever you guys would like to talk about. I'm good for anything.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So just kind of give us a background.
Sure. So, do you just want me to jump into it?
Yeah, just jump into it.
Okay. Well, Dice of Crowns was the first game that we published. The way that worked out is that the person that came up with the idea, Badger, was a guy that worked with me, and I work in the software industry. And we gamed a lot in the afternoons, and he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, check out this game that I made." And he's got a 3D printer, so he printed up all these dice and tokens and whatnot. And for him, he has a lot of inspiration when he does a lot of long distance driving. So he had spent some time driving, I think, back from Portland, and was just kind of like letting his mind run. And he came up with this idea based on kind of Game of Thrones, where people were, kind of backstabbing each other and fighting over contention for a crown. So we put this whole thing together, threw it together, and brought it to lunch, and we played through it. And while it had some issues, I really liked the core concept of what was going on, and I really saw that spark of something really special to it. And we had already created a company to be able to start doing self-publishing. And I said, hey, this is a really cool game with a lot of promise. I have a lot of different art contacts, really good artists and illustrators that I've worked with in the past. I'd love to be able to publish this and, have you be a part of that. And then he was a good friend of ours. So he's like, yeah, that sounds really cool. I just made it because it seemed fun. So we worked on it for a while and, worked on polishing it up and tweaking things and playtesting it for quite a while. I'm part of a group called Playtest Northwest up here in Seattle, and it's a consortium, if you will, of indie designers and publishers, and it gives us a chance to hit all of the conventions that go on up here. There's a whole lot of them. There's at least, like a dozen or so in the Pacific Northwest. And so we get to go to most of the conventions and demo with different people. Playtest Northwest also gets us into local game stores so we can game there and get a nice broad spectrum of lots of different player types and ages and genders and, whatever, just like a huge, spread of different player types. So that was a good, benefit for him to be able to have this like assortment of people to be able to playtest the game and identify it. Yeah, this is a game that's really fun. People really dig it. It worked really well with up to 6 players. So we put it into a convention for gamers. Basically, it was called the Evergreen Tabletop Expo, and I believe this was year 2 of the Evergreen Tabletop Expo, and they had a thing going called the Lucy Awards. So designers would submit their games, and there was a group of people in the industry that would evaluate the games and then decide, which of these were contenders for being able to win this contest. So we were part of the group that got narrowed down. They then pared it down a little farther, down to I want to say the top 8. The top 8 were invited to ETX to be able to demo their game to everybody there, and then they had it got down to the top 4 from there. And the way they did the top 4 was the top 4 people, all the judges went around and played all the games, and then they narrowed it down to the top 4. And then the top 4, the judges did individual interviews with everybody and asked them, why did you do this? Or did you see a problem with this thing? Kind of grilled everybody, essentially. And while we didn't win the top award, what we did win was the People's Choice Award, which for someone that was getting ready to go into Kickstarter, honestly, the people really dug it. It's a lighter game, so I can understand, the judges that might be a little more into really heavy, crunchy games, not maybe liking this one just as much, but they still saw value in it. So, that was a win for me, and the designer was really happy with that as well. We went into Kickstarter, and kind of killed it, to be honest.
Yeah.
It funded in 17 hours, I believe, 17, 18 hours. And we knocked out all the stretch goals, and we were able to produce this dice game that was just really solidly built. The production quality was really high. Everybody really enjoyed the art and presentation of the game. So let me explain a little bit about what Dice of Crowns is. It's a dice game you've got 7 dice. You've got these tokens that represent claims to the crown, and then you have tokens that represent fate. And then you have the crown, an actual modeled piece that is your claim, your victory. And so everybody's fighting to become the ruler of the land. The king's dead. Everybody feels like, well, I should be the ruler, right? It's me. So in most dice games, like say zombie dice and things like that, really what you're doing is you're rolling your dice and you're just figuring out your results, and eventually your turn ends and then the next person takes their turn. The thing that's special about this game is you roll your dice, and then there's a certain die roll. It's a scroll face. When that shows up, you have to hand those dice out to other players, and then they get to roll. And the things that they roll can impact you in various ways. So, for example, there's 4 different icons in the game. There's a crown. Crown is part of your goal to success. There's a dagger. Daggers are bad. Daggers can end your turn. 3 of them end your turn. There's a skull, and skulls represent fate. 5 of those, you can get a claim to the crown, or you can use 3 of those to get a fate token. And the scrolls get handed out. Now, say you're rolling your dice and you get a couple scrolls. You hand them to me, and then I roll. If I roll a scroll, it just goes back to you. No harm, no foul. If it's a dagger, I can give it back to you, or I can give it to another player at the table. So if there's maybe player number 4 is really kind of starting to run away with the game, like, no, screw that guy, I'm giving him a dagger. He can start his turn with a dagger. It's going to mean less dice for you, potentially less dice for me, but allows us to try and pull that guy that's getting ahead back a little bit. If it's a skull, it comes back to you. That could help you out. And if it's a crown, I get to keep it in order to advance my win goal. So there's a lot of table talk that goes on. Once you hit the scrolls, you're like, oh crap, who do I give these to? And you have some people going, oh, give it to me, give it to me. I won't send a dagger back to you. I'll send it to this guy instead. So there's a lot of mini alliances that get built up, and then sudden inevitable betrayals as someone tries to go for a win. For a dice game, there's just a lot of table talk, which you really don't tend to get in those sort of games.
No, you certainly don't see any type of negotiating dice games.
Yeah. So, and it was something that really kind of stuck out as unique and special and interesting, and being able to keep everybody engaged through the entire course of the game.
What made you want to go through Kickstarter rather than perhaps trying to get the game published through a regular publisher?
Well, a couple of reasons actually. One, being able to self-publish, that's a difficult thing to do. Typically, if you're just going to just straight up publish, you need to have, I don't know, $40,000-$50,000 to go in on a project, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on what you're going to do. That's a big chunk of change for someone to just come up with. If we were to give it to someone else, we relinquish a lot of control over the direction of the game, the art style, the art direction. For us, we wanted to start growing ourselves as a publisher, and we wanted to try and bring something interesting into the gaming space that maybe you don't see all the time. And as an indie publisher, you have a little more flexibility to be able to take risks like that I don't think the bigger publishers can't really afford those kind of risks. They have a certain wheelhouse that they sort of have to kind of pigeon themselves into, and they can't deviate out far that really wildly. Where we want to, we just want that freedom, right? And so being smaller, we can take risks. I felt like this wasn't a huge risk, but I mean it is something a little different. So we wanted to do that as a self-publishing thing.
And so in terms of setting up, was this your first Kickstarter? Understood.
Yes.
And so how did you negate all the logistics in terms of finding someone that actually produces the game, the setting up the Kickstarter, and just all the bells and whistles that tends to take place whenever you're trying to make a product? Did you already have contacts in that business, or that was just something you went out and did yourself?
Um, so we'd actually started. Well, this was our first Kickstarter as Thing 12 Games, under Thing 12 Games for our account on Kickstarter. We had done one previously called Dirty Cops that was under my personal account, um, and it's one that we're eventually going to circle back around on. But we had some we had a few missteps with that one, mostly from a production quality. Like, we were overproducing the game, and that made the price a little higher, and so we ended up canceling the project. Just, it wasn't going to fund, so like, let's just cancel it, let's retool and talk to backers and get their input on stuff. From how do we deal with the logistics? I'm kind of lucky in the fact that it isn't just me as the company. I partnered with a good friend of mine who's also a producer in the software industry, and together, when we first started out, I was looking at Kickstarter and backing a lot of games and watching these people that were running successful Kickstarters, watching what they were doing from the creative angle. How are they really engaging their audience? What kind of things were they doing from the presentation standpoint? What were they doing as far as continuing to communicate with their backers, that sort of thing? And what were people doing wrong? Kickstarters that I had backed that ended up having to cancel. Okay, what kind of missteps were they making? What did I feel like they were kind of missing out on? And at the same time, my business partner was following Kickstarter, but he was following it from the financial side of things. He was looking at, okay, what kind of manufacturers are out there? What kind of things do they charge for? How much do they charge versus, the product? What about their turnaround times? All that sort of stuff. All the like actual like logistics of making a game. That was less my interest, and that was more of his. So when we got to talking, that we were both looking at Kickstarter in these different ways. Like, we would be a really good fit together, because I'm the front end, what does it look like, engage with the audience, and you're kind of the back end, like the nuts, bolts, engine part. Let's work together. And we did that. We made the company Think 12 Games. So having access to a lot of really creative people from the look side of things. So we worked with a good friend of ours, Chris Quistorf, who is the illustrator for Dice of Crowns. So he's the one that really helped put a lot of the visuals together on our Kickstarter page. He helped put together the video. He built that inside of Unity. Really, really talented person with a really cool creative eye. And he was someone that I knew would be a great fit if he wanted to work with us. And we talked to him about what our goals were and that sort of thing, and he was down with it. So he's been working with us on all of our projects from the Kickstarter side of things as an illustrator. Darren Michelson did the art for Dice of Crowns, and I knew that Darren was a really strong artist, but he hadn't really done anything as far as like this angle, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to kind of stretch himself as an artist and be able to, kind of carry an artistic vision forward into a physical product. And that was something he was really excited about. One of the things that we do as an indie publisher is I give my guys a lot more freedom to have a say in what we're doing. Ultimately, it's my call from the creative side and my financial partner's call from the financial side. But we really let everybody that's involved in these projects have a voice, have a say. Sometimes decisions can, little arguments can break out, but everybody knows that they're coming from a point of passion, a point of really wanting the product to be as good as possible. And we've never had any like, oh, I'm done with you, or anything like that, like huge breakups. But I like being able to have everyone involved. It's not just the Sean show, for example.
Right. And so, with your current game that you have out on Kickstarter right now, which I was just looking through here, is that the Dice of Pirates? Is that just how's that compared to Dice of Crowns?
It's a good question. So one of the questions we've had from people is Dice of Pirates just a reskin of Dice of Crowns? That's a valid question. The answer is no. We do, from my standpoint, from an artistic side of things, if you're just doing a reskin of your game, that's so creatively bankrupt and lazy. Don't do that. Bring something new and interesting to what you're presenting to people. And we knew that we were going to have an interesting design box to work in. So people coming into Dice of Pirates that had played Dice of Crowns before would have a certain expectation of certain elements to the game. And we identified those as the dice that get handed out to other players, and then a rule of 3. So in Dice of Crowns, if you get 3 crowns, you get a claim token. 3 claim tokens, you win. If you get 3 daggers end your turn. If you get 3 skulls, you get a fate token. So, there's this rule of 3 thing that works really well in the game. So those are the 2 elements we knew we had to keep to some fashion. Beyond that, we wanted the game to really feel like a piratey experience. So Dice of Crowns feels more having to make alliances, having to backstab people, a lot more like kind of courtroom drama, if you will, where Dice of Pirates, if you're going to be piratey, you got to go for the jugular. I think one of the things we've said is Dice of Pirates is the dagger in your back. Dice of Crowns is the dagger in your back. Dice of Pirates is the dagger in your face. You see it coming. You know exactly who's going to do it. So it had to be more about aggression, like going for gold. So one of the things that we did differently is that you are starting with a certain amount of gold and you're playing to reach a certain threshold. You can go and get gold from the sea using your dice, or you can go and attack people and try and steal gold from them. So that was something really different that allowed people to have a unique experience inside this game, but still have some elements like if you roll a ship, well, a ship's kind of like a scroll. You have to send it out to another player, and then they get to roll, and what they roll can impact the game. So we had some elements that were similar, but some that were unique and different.
And so with that, of course, with any type of game design, you're yourself being a publisher, what do you look for if a designer brings you a game in terms of something that you would be interested in publishing?
You sort of have to know what your company's wheelhouse of interest is to a point, right? Like for me, the games that we're publishing, I want there to be an element of interactivity between players. I'm less interested about games that are just sort of solitaire. There has to be, if we're getting together to play a game, let's play something that allows us to interact with each other. So a lot of our games that we're working on, including the ones that are like, out for like next year and things like that, have some element where players are interacting with each other in some fashion. So if someone brings me a game, that's something I look for. Like, what's a way that I can interact with people? And if it's not there, then I am interested in the game, I see that that it's fun. There's something interesting and new to this game. It's not just a rehash of something else. Then is there a way that you could interject that and make the game a little more interesting, a little more involving people rather than just having lots of downtime between turns?
Right. And so you mentioned the things that you have in the pipeline for next year. Is there anything that coming out that you're particularly excited about?
There's man, it's daunting the amount of games that we're looking at for next year. It's kind of crazy. There are 2 in particular that we're working on. One is currently called Battle for Arkham, and this is a 2-player game with a super tight economy, an investigator versus a person working for Cthulhu, right? So it's a Cthulhu-themed game. And you have 6 cards in your hand. You're going to be playing 5 of them. Both players have the same cards, but they have slight differences in their victory point value and their currency value. And so it's this game where you play a card face down and you put out a bid for it, and both players get to bid on that card. Whoever wins the bid gets the card. The other person gets the currency. So there's this really tight push-pull back and forth element of being able to manipulate other people's cards, being able to influence bidding. I've played this with people, and people that are more into, kind of random dice games or, lighter games. They're like, this is really kind of weighty and thinky, more so than you would expect from a game with 12 cards that you're playing, right? It's super light. So we've got a really cool artist that's working on this game. I'm really excited to where we're going to take this from a production standpoint. Being able to have a limited number of assets in the game is going to allow us to really increase the quality and the value of what that game looks like and feels like. So that's why I'm super excited. That's going to be an early one for next year. There's another game that we're working on. It's a more family-oriented game built by a young child who was the child of a designer friend of ours who's done some really cool stuff with Daily Magic. And despite being a game that was built by a child, the game is really interesting and has some interesting choices to make. And again, it has an element where you can mess with other players at the table in a way that's not unfair or anything like that. I like the story, the idea of that this was a family game built by a kid that's interesting enough for adults to play. And we've played it with just straight up adults at several conventions, and people really dug it and really enjoyed it. The artist we have working on this is just doing this fantastically, really cute art. But we're also adding this element of educational value to the cards. So it's a dinosaur themed game, and each of the dinosaurs has some factoid about what the dinosaur did or something like that. So it's a family game that has some educational elements that allows people to interact together. That seems cool.
Oh yeah, and dinosaurs are a big thing.
Yeah.
That's always something that, and again, with all the various themes that we see coming out of board gaming, it's very easy for people to get kind of caught up in the same things over and over. But the more that you've seen, even today with some of the bigger box board games, people are taking themes that we have seen before in the past and redoing them and putting different mechanics on them, and they're bringing old themes back to life. I mean, everybody's always knocking the Cthulhu thing since it's kind of a public domain. But again, how many good games are out there that have that theme? There's always someone that comes along and puts some interesting mechanics to it and spices things up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like again, if you're bringing something new, something interesting, something different to what's going on, I think that's something really cool. The artist that I have that's working on the cards for us, he was actually unaware of the whole Cthulhu mythos. It was just something that had fallen, like this was outside of his spectrum of influence, I guess. But the things that he's worked on, as far as like some of the artistic things he's done, they're really in line with that. So I started showing him these things. He's like, "Oh my God, what is this? This is crazy." So I love the idea that I could take someone that had never seen Cthulhu type stuff, and I'm giving him just textual examples of what these might be, and then letting him race with these with his own really unique vision of what Cthulhu creatures and Cthulhian elements can look like, because I didn't want to do just what everybody else is doing, right? And so he's going to have a really fresh take on it because he's never seen this stuff before. So that's really interesting.
Right. And going back to kind of the design of games, and this, you yourself, no doubt, being a project manager and having to deal with this and seeing a lot of games get designed from the ground up, what is the design process that you generally witness? Do people start with the theme, or do they start with the mechanics?
There's lots of different ways that people start. Myself, when I design games, because I decided to be crazy enough to do the publishing side and sometimes design side as well. I approach design typically from a thematic place first. Like there's some sort of theme that drives me to do a game. Like, that's a really cool thing. I haven't really seen anything like that before. Or, oh, that's a neat idea. If I married that with a really interesting mechanic, that could be really cool. Badger, on the other hand, the designer of Dice of Crowns and Dice of Pirates, he designs more from a mechanic standpoint. So he comes up with some engine or some sort of mechanical way of things, or how things are built. And that is really interesting for him. And he kind of like works on honing that down. I think there's some other people that come at it from more of a story-based approach, or just the idea of maybe like a name of a game, and then they kind of build from there. So there's lots of different ways that people can come up with their concepts.
This Badger guy seems like he's halfway violent. It's between Badger and this consortium of Playtest Northwest, I'm not sure you're not in a cult rather than a design. So just get out while you can. But interestingly enough, I myself enjoy. I like Euro games, but I do understand a lot of the Euro games here tend to be like a solitary experience. My favorite games are always something that is a lot of negotiation, a lot of aggression. My favorite game is the Game of Thrones.
Nice.
I love having something where I can somewhat mess with somebody, and I'm thinking that is. We're seeing more and more games, it seems like, where people are focusing more on the player interaction rather than just having a solitary experience. And even you see that in a lot of the party games or the lighter games. So it's nice to see that somebody has taken a dice game and made it into where it's not just chunking dice and seeing what randomly comes up, but really something that requires some negotiating and some aggression. We're all about getting that aggression out.
Exactly, and you do it in a fun, safe place that there's nobody's really out to ruin your day. It's like, oh, let's have some fun in this make believe world and screw each other over and stab each other in the back, and then have a lot of laughs doing so.
No, I really am out to ruin people. I'm filled with hate, and I suspect that Badger is too. So bless his heart. We're kindred souls, filled with hate and wanting to wreck other people's day. And so that's always something nice. And so very exciting to hear about your upcoming project. I see Dice of Pirates. No doubt. Now, is this coming to retail after the Kickstarter? Is that a common thing with a lot of your games?
Yes, we identified that we don't want to just be a Kickstarter only company. That there's an importance to be having your game inside of a local game store. Not just from the fact that we want it out there, but we actually want to support the local game stores as well. There's a lot of really cool like board game cafes that have been popping up around in our area for sure, in the Seattle area. There's a lot that are growing up, and it's really cool because it's places that you can go and hang out and have a beer or get some food and play some games and really have a really fun experience. And you see kind of that going on around you. Sometimes you can meet up with different people. There's lots of meetups where people meet at local game stores. So having our game in these places that's available was just important for us to keep pushing the hobby and the industry forward.
Yeah, and that's true, man. And I think people who have board game shops in their locations kind of take them for granted. Here in my neck of the woods, we don't have any local game stores at all. I mean, it is a
Oh wow.
Yeah, it is a particularly rural area, and just most of the people in this area are not in the board games. You have to go out and find people and try to convince them and hopefully not scare them away by introducing them into the hobby. And so because of that, I think any area where you have a board game shop, people in the area the locals will happen in and at least get some taste of what it's like. And so it's not something that's completely out of the right field. When I tell people at work that I play board games, they kind of look at you weird. They do the whole Monopoly thing and then wonder what you do. I think my wife just started telling people that I've got a meth lab and that's how I spend all my time, rather than actually, where's your husband? Oh yeah, he's out playing board games. That doesn't sound too interesting in our neck of the woods. But anyways, it might be different up there in the cloudy town of Seattle.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, I think the rain alone is enough to like kind of drive people in, and it's a reason for us to hang out inside somewhere and do some gaming. But this is kind of a nerd heavy centric area where everybody's very geeky around here. It's a heavy software industry that's in the Seattle area. So there's a lot of people that are just interested in that, and I think that's why we've seen so many different gaming related or geeky related conventions popping up in this area. They said that every couple of months there's at least 1 to 2 conventions that I could be going to. for different things. So it's pretty cool. It's a little exhausting, but it's a lot of fun though.
Right. You not happen to be attending the Board Game Geek convention down here in Dallas here next month, are you?
Sadly, no. I'm so disappointed. There is one that I'm going to get to go to that is a little farther over on the other side. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, there's a couple things that need to happen, but I'll be going to PAX Unplugged.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one I'm hoping to get to. There's some people I'm going to be working with they're doing this system that basically teaches you how to play a game and gives you rules called the rules over the Alexa system. So if you have Alexa, you can say, "Hey Alexa, teach me how to play Dice of Crowns," and she'll walk you through the process. Or if you had a question about, "Hey Alexa, what do the daggers mean in Dice of Crowns?" and she'll pop up and tell you about the daggers.
That's an interesting concept. And I could not imagine the logistics of trying to have some sort of software that's that versatile and being able to teach a game. I've seen Kickstarters and things of that nature for people coming up with that same software, trying to teach something, trying to put Rodney Smith out of business, no doubt. Which they'll never put him out of business. He's Canadian.
Right.
Yeah, he's too friendly. I got to meet him. Well, I didn't get to meet him. I stood behind him at a convention, the Board Game Geek convention last year. He is really very nice, and he smells really good. And I don't know why that is. I was standing in line trying to get a cappuccino down there, and I didn't want to just some random person come up to you and start saying, "Hey, I watch you on the internet." That just sounds weird, and so I was trying to play it cool, but. He's super friendly. He's a super friendly guy.
Yeah, he sure seems like it. I mean, and again, being Canadian, of course he's friendly. I mean, who isn't from Canada?
Well, see, we're down here in Texas, so we don't see Canadians. They're like a unicorn to us, and we can anybody who's north of Kansas, we can spot them a mile away. And poor Rodney stood out like a sore thumb, and you knew he was not from around, but he was a particularly friendly guy, and
right.
But well, that's before we get off here, just to kind of give an idea, we always hit some people up about their favorite board game. Of course, it can't be one of your own or one that's published. Yeah, you can't plug that. What is your favorite one?
Wow. I'm going to say The Others by Eric Lang and Cool Mini or Not. That was a Kickstarter that I went all in on, and I got all the extras and all the extra sins and all that. It's a one versus many game where a player takes on the role of one of the 7 sins, and they play through a story where the other players are these heroes. Sometimes they look like monstrous looking heroes, but they're heroes nonetheless, and they have some sort of sin that's against them, some element of kind of a downside, and it's basically, can you defeat the sins and save the world from corruption, or will the sin player defeat all the heroes and reign supreme? It's a really interesting game for being a one versus many. The sin player constantly feels behind the 8 ball, like, oh man, the heroes are just constantly like, they're just so close to overpowering me, and the heroes feel like, oh my god, the sin player is just wrecking our house and is making it so tough. So neither player really feels like they're going to just win outright, which I think that's a great selling point of a one versus many. Like, it's a real challenge, and I love the theme to this. It's so really dark and gritty and scary and horrific. It's a really good one.
We've got like a running joke about our Eric Lang. So, yeah, the cult of Eric Lang. Everybody loves anything Eric Lang brings out, and we in our group we're always making fun of Eric Lang. Oh, this year he released The Godfather, and it was like, who's going to get that? And I was like, I'm not. It's Eric Lang. You know how I feel about Eric Lang. I'm not big on Eric Lang. And Godfather so far has been my most played game of the year. Just cannot get enough of it, and I know it's
good.
It's just a simple, kind of worker placement and theme. I mean, it's exactly what I imagined it would be. I just didn't think I would like it as much as I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had to cool down about bashing Eric Lang, and so I've kind of that's taken the wind out of my sails, is making fun of Eric Lang, because anytime Well, I'm always saying, I'll just throw some minis in it. Just throw some minis in a box and some dice, and that's an Eric Lang game. And give him a hard time. But no, again, I got to meet Eric Lang very briefly last year, demoing a Rising Sun there with the Dice Tower people, and of course they were all gathered around, and they were playing it and they were watching. Tom Vassell and Z Garcia were there, and they were just kind of all standing around, and I thought, yeah, this is it. This is the cult of Eric Lang. Just have their minis. But yeah, so
he was at PAX West, not this year but last year, and he was there for a video game. He'd done some design work for this company, and so he was over in this one like board game area. And it was funny because since PAX is primarily a video game focused convention, and the board gaming section is off in this other building, I came by. I'm like, well, there's no one there to like say hi to him or hang out and talk to him. Like, I'm going to take that chance. So I went up and I talked to him for quite a while, and super nice guy,
Yeah.
like just super cool. So to counter your point about like throw minis and dice into a box, have you ever played Dolores?
Oh,
HMS Dolores.
the HMS Dolores. I've been wanting to play that. And that's the one where you have the cards and you have to either, not like rock, paper, scissors, but throw out a hand signal, whether you're in agreement to split the loot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been wanting to play that because that looks mean. And that's another one. I could not believe he designed that. I'm often going through and nosy about which designers are out. And I kind of keep track of which designer I particularly enjoy and what games they keep putting out that I consistently like. And I do the reverse of that. Somebody I don't like, I'm always watching to see if they just got that one game that I tend to enjoy. And I noticed that HMS Dolores, and again, that's a very small box game for what it is.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and the cards are, pretty compact and small. That's one that I picked up and we've played with in our group, and it's a lot of fun. It definitely has mean elements where you can really screw someone over in the actions that you're taking, but it's really tough for scoring because you don't get to score all the cards that you get. You only, I think you score like the ones that you have the most of and the one that you have the least of. And everything else in the middle, you don't get to score at all. So it's really tricky.
One small box game that's similar to that. Well, I say it's similar. It's probably not mechanically, but our go-to game, it tends to be Skull. I have no clue who designed Skull. As many games of that as I've played, very colorful. Sounds just like what it is. Pictures of skulls and roses, basically on coasters. And just the simplicity of the game itself, how easy it is to teach and engages a large group of people. That's always something that I find that's always a winner. To always have a few games that if you find somebody that you can try to bring into the hobby, start off with something light and try to get them interacting with the group and kind of bring them into the fold, into the cult of Eric Lang. Which apparently he is a genius. Apparently, when it comes to design, I have to give him that. He is certainly year after year. He he seems like he always brings his A game. Him and Martin Wallace.
Yeah, Martin's a really interesting designer as well. There's a lot of like people that are starting to make a really big name for themselves. Bruno Cathala and Jimmy Stegmeyer and like all those guys. They're making a name, I think, simply because they make solid games that are really fun. I've seen Skull around, but I haven't had a chance to play it. I mean, it looked really interesting. So it sounds like I'm gonna have to pick that one up.
It's particularly simplistic, but it's a drinking game is what I call. There are certain games that I have to play. I cannot be. I'm a lightweight. If I drink 2 beers, I'm liable to lose my senses and not be able to make wise decisions in a board game. But there are some games that just require this level of just identifying if somebody is bluffing or not. And that's all Skull is. It's just a big bluffing game of being able to tell what the other person's doing. And that's right up most people's alleys.
Nice.
But it's overall. Well, Sean, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for letting us interview you.
Absolutely.
We're certainly looking forward here to seeing the success of Dice of Pirates and your upcoming games coming out. And like I said, your Dice of Pirates right now, as recording this, you still got 15 days to go, don't you?
Yeah,
So
yeah, we're going up until the pull up the calendar here. I'm going up until the 23rd. So the 21st and 22nd, there's a convention down in Eastern Washington, Central City Comic Con that we're going to be at. So I wanted that to be the final huzzah
Yeah.
for doing some play tests with people. So that's gonna be pretty cool.
Oh, good deal. Well, I certainly do appreciate your time, Sean, and we thank you for letting you interview us.
Oh, thanks.
Interview you. Tell Badger hi for me.
I will, sir.
Is
Thank you
that
so much for having me on.
Is that his? Where does he get that name? Badgers? Do you have a lot of those up there in Seattle?
He got it. It's more of a nickname that he got because his first name is Brander, but nobody was able to say Brander. They would either say Brandon or some other variation, and he really likes Badgers, and that was like one of his icons for his profile images for quite a while, and so it sort of stuck that he was like, just go and call me Badger, and it was sort of a running joke, and then it sort of took off and became had a life of its own, and now everybody just calls him Badger.
He likes badgers.
Oh yeah.
That's very odd. That's not generally the animal that most people would pick is a badger.
It's very fitting for him.
Huh.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. Anytime you would like to have me back on, I'd love to be on.
All righty, we'll get in touch with you. Appreciate
Sweet.
you.
Take care, sir.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Board Game Snobs. Stay classy.